To save money, my best friend Hazel and I rented a two-bedroom, one living room apartment together. Then Hazel started dating. Every Friday, she'd bring her boyfriend Daniel home. Being considerate, I'd always retreat to my room voluntarily. But I could never fall asleep, tormented by the noises drifting from next door. One day, Hazel suddenly suggested swapping rooms with me. The AC in my room is way too cold. I can't stand it anymore. You're always complaining about the heat, right? Why don't we switch? I had no objections, so we swapped that very day. Little did I know. Late that night, someone would crawl into my bed. I lay awake as ambiguous sounds continued to seep through the thin walls of our old apartment, walls that had never been good at soundproofing. Soon, Hazel's soft, coquettish voice floated over, "No more. I'm exhausted." We'd moved in together right after college, fresh out of school with meager salaries. This affordable old apartment had seemed perfect. Until Hazel got together with Daniel. Every Friday since, I'd been forced to listen to their heavy breathing and the rhythmic thudding against the wall, a tortuous experience for a single person like me. Still, I understood and never blamed her, eventually drifting off to sleep amid the symphony of their passion. One night, half asleep, I heard my door creak open. Hazel's voice followed, "Don't worry. Clara's asleep, just go wash up in her bathrooms, he won't wake up." My room was the master bedroom with an ensuite bathroom. The showerhead in the living room bathroom had broken ages ago, so Hazel usually used mine. Instantly wide awake, I squeezed my eyes shut and slowed my breathing. Pretending to be fast asleep, a silent ghost swallowed by the darkness. At first, Daniel hesitated. But he finally gave in to Hazel's urging and slipped quietly into my bathroom. The patter of running water filtered through the door, mixed with his low, restrained gasps. Even in my naivety, I could guess what he was doing. I couldn't help but wonder, hadn't they just been intimate? Then I remembered Hazel's complaint, "Daniel's perfect except for one thing, he's too rough in bed. I can barely keep up." Hazel loved braised pork, and luckily, I was an expert at making it. It was the weekend, so we both had the day off. We went to the market together to buy ingredients for a fancy dinner. Braised pork is quite labor-intensive. I slaved away in the kitchen for hours. The late autumn heat, what we call autumn tiger in China, was brutal. And without AC in the kitchen, I was soaked to the bone with sweat when I finally emerged. Hazel looked guilty. "Clara, you're the best. What are best friends for? If I don't spoil you, who will?" Her eyes turned distant as she sighed. "Ethan, you're so good to me, why can't he just compromise a little?" Her tone was laced with resentment, clearly directed at Daniel. "What's wrong? Did you fight with him?" She nodded. "My parents want me to move back home for work. I asked Daniel to come with me, but he refused. I knew Daniel had a great job at a big company in City A major metropolis, far more promising than Hazel's small hometown. It made sense he didn't want to give up such an opportunity as an outsider." I didn't know what to say, so I just patted her shoulder reassuringly. She pouted, then gestured at my sweaty clothes. "You ray dripping. Why not take a shower first?" "Sure," I replied, but paused halfway to my room. "My pajamas are still wet. Do you have any I can borrow?" We often shared clothes, so it wasn't an unusual request. She nodded and fetched a set from her room. "I bought this the other day, but the chest area is too big for me. It might fit you better. You can keep it." Hazel was slim, while I was curvier, especially in the bust. As she handed me the pajamas, I blushed even before unfolding them. They were made of sheer, flimsy fabric that felt almost non-existent. "Isn't this a bit too sexy? I'm embarrassed to wear it." "Don't be silly. You have the figure for it. You'll look amazing. Besides, it's just us at home. What's there to be shy about?" Hazel had always been bold, with a penchant for sexy outfits. Staring at the translucent fabric, I finally gave in. It wasn't Friday, so Daniel wouldn't be coming over. We really were alone. After dinner, we sat in the living room watching TV. Suddenly, Hazel leaned over. "Clara, can we switch rooms again?" I looked at her in surprise. "The AC in my room is still freezing, and I hate the cold. But it's way too stuffy without AC this weather, please." It was true, she'd always hated the cold. When we first moved in, I'd offered her the master bedroom, but she'd insisted on the smaller one because its window faced the community garden, offering a lovely view. "You hate the heat, right? The AC in my room is perfect for you. Please switch with me." I couldn't resist her relentless pleading and agreed we moved our things right away and spent the night in our new rooms. That evening, I put on the pajamas Hazel had given me and climbed into bed. Despite my initial hesitation, the fabric was incredibly soft and comfortable, light as a feather, with no sense of restraint. I loved it. Embarrassingly enough, I had a steamy dream that night. The man in my dream had a blurry face. But he held me tightly from behind, his arms like iron bands around my waist, my back pressed against his chest, the sheer pajama fabric doing nothing to separate our bodies. I could feel his scorching warmth, his breath on my neck. Flustered, I tried to pull away. But his grip only tightened, his hand slid under my pajama top. Fear surged through me, and I struggled instinctively then jolted awake. But the warmth against my back didn't fade, the arms around my waist were still there, terrified. I spun around, ready to push him away, only to freeze at the sound of his heavy breathing. Hazel. He murmured in my ear. It was Daniel, Hazel's boyfriend. But it was Sunday. They only ever met on Fridays. None of that mattered now, though the question was, didn't he know we'd swapped rooms? Had Hazel forgotten to tell him? In his drunken state I could smell the faint scent of alcohol on his breath. He must have mistaken me for Hazel. We were similar in build and voice. After all, had he been drinking because of their fight? I knew I should push him away immediately. Tell him the truth, but as my hand touched his arm, I hesitated. Hazel was sleeping right next door. If I woke her up and she found her boyfriend in her best friend's bed, touching me like this, would they break up? My resistance weakened. My hands going limp against his chest. Suddenly, I thought of all those Friday nights lying awake, listening to their passion, my own loneliness gnawing at me. I remembered Hazel's words, Daniel's too rough. I can't take it. A reckless curiosity surged within me, had to know if it was true. Sensing my compliance, a low chuckle rumbled in his throat. He leaned down and kissed me. My hands moved up from his chest to wrap around his neck, and I surrendered to the moment, losing myself twice in the heat of passion. Just as we finished, Daniel's phone rang, an emergency at work. Demanding his immediate return, he left in a hurry, and I let out a silent sigh of relief. The next day, I felt awkward around Hazel, but she didn't seem to notice anything amiss. A few days later, Daniel came over again. I greeted him with a quick nod as usual, but my heart was pounding. I was terrified he'd realize I wasn't Hazel that night. Fortunately, his gaze didn't linger on me. I went to the kitchen to cook while they watched TV in the living room. Suddenly, his voice sounded behind me, "Let me help you." Startled, I accidentally twisted the already loose faucet handle until it snapped off completely. Of course, it was an old apartment, with old, worn-out fixtures. The faucet had been on the fritz for ages, but I kept forgetting to call someone to fix it. Hazel was even more oblivious. She never paid attention to these trivial household chores. Water sprayed wildly from the broken fixture, drenching me instantly. I gasped and instinctively raised my hands to shield my face, but my clothes were soaked through to the skin. Amidst the chaos, the figure pressed against my back, enveloping me entirely. The unfamiliar yet familiar woody scent of Daniel's cologne surrounded me in an instant. I froze, and turned to look up at him. His jaw was taut, his gaze fixed intently on the broken faucet as his hands reached around me to clamp down tightly on the gushing water. "I'll hold it, go turn off the main valve," his deep, pleasant voice rumbled above me. But I was transfixed, rooted to the spot. Noticing my hesitation, Daniel glanced down at me. Our eyes met, and I saw his brows furrow slightly, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. Snapping back to my senses, I ducked out of his embrace and scurried to shut off the valve in my slippers. Hazel, who'd been lounging in the living room eating snacks and watching TV, looked up at my hurried comings and goings. "Clara, what's wrong?" she asked, flustered but truthful. I replied, "The faucet broke, I had to turn off the water." Hazel shrugged and turned back to the TV, as if it were none of her business. When I returned to the kitchen, the water had been contained. Daniel was bending over, shaking the water out of his shirt. He looked up as I approached, and our eyes met again. Guilt flooded me, and I quickly lowered my gaze, but I could feel his stare lingering on me. "Your clothes are soaked," he said. "Go change before you catch a cold. I'll handle the rest here." Only then did I look down at myself. My white t-shirt was clinging to every curve, the damp fabric outlining my figure, clearly blushing fiercely. I turned and fled the kitchen for my room. Dinner was silent. Daniel kept piling food onto Hazel's plate, and the two of them whispered and nuzzled each other occasionally. I shoveled my food into my mouth quickly and retreated to my room lying in bed. I listened to the sounds outside soon. I heard the door to Hazel's room close. My mind wandered uncontrollably. What were they doing now? Kissing, taking off their clothes, falling into bed? I closed my eyes, trying to force myself to sleep, but the images wouldn't stop. I thought of that night with Daniel. Just as I was consumed by these relentless thoughts, a loud bang echoed through the apartment, the sound of a door slamming shut next door followed by Hazel's shrill, hysterical voice. When have you ever cared about my feelings? I said I don't want to. Can't you understand? After a long pause, Daniel's voice came, low and strained. Hazel, hi Dottis. I'm a man. Then came the sound of a door opening and closing. The apartment fell silent. I lay in bed for a while. Then finally got up and put on my shoes. Stepping out into the hallway, I saw Hazel squatting outside her door, her head buried in her knees, sobbing softly. A jumble of emotions washed over me. Hazel and Daniel had fought. He didn't show up for a whole week. And Hazel slipped back into her old reckless lifestyle. Before dating Daniel, she'd had several boyfriends. She loved partying and clubbing. Daniel was more conservative though and hated those places, so she cut back on going out. But only I knew she still snuck out once a week, dragging me along as a cover. I hated clubs. Every time we went, I'd just sit in a corner and watch her cuddle and flirt with male models. Sometimes I wondered if she really loved Daniel at all. One night, Hazel stumbled back to the apartment dead drunk. When I tried to help her, she pushed me away, and I fell, hitting my hip against the table. The pain was sharp. But I managed to recover and helped her to her room using her phone. I sent Daniel a message. Daniel, this is Hazel's best friends. He has drunk and keeps calling your name. Can you come check on her? The message was met with silence. I thought he wouldn't come, but half an hour later, there was a knock at the door. Hazel had given him a key. After all, how else would he have snuck in that night and climbed into my bed? Daniel let himself in at that moment. I was taking a shower in the bathroom attached to Hazel's room, which was now mine, but we'd swapped back. I hadn't expected him to arrive, so after showering, I just wrapped a towel around myself and stepped out. We collided head-on. As he pushed the door open, he instinctively reached out to steady me, and I grabbed his collar to balance myself. Our eyes locked, and neither of us let go. Daniel's brows furrowed suddenly. What shower gel do you use? He blurted out. I froze. Peach, I replied honestly. He blinked, then said, it smells nice. We both fell silent, still staring at each other, our hands still on each other. It wasn't until Hazel tossed and muttered in her sleep that we snapped back to reality. We pulled away from each other, as if shocked by electricity. But my towel slipped loose. I gasped and instinctively covered my chest, only to realize I couldn't cover both my chest and lower body at the same time. The embarrassment was overwhelming. And in that awkward moment, I saw Daniel's gaze lingering on my exposed skin, his Adam's apple bobbing uncontrollably. Finally, I grabbed the towel, wrapped it clumsily around myself, and fled back to my room. Daniel stayed in Hazel's room to take care of her all night. The next morning, Hazel sobered up when she saw Daniel. She threw herself into his arms, sobbing, but Daniel's hands hung stiffly at his side. She never hugged her back somehow, though they'd made up. I didn't ask Hazel, but the smile on her face said it all. Life seemed to return to normal. It was soon time for Hazel's weekly club night. She tugged at my arm. Clara, come with me. If Daniel calls, I won't know how to explain. I smiled, about to agree when I caught sight of Daniel's car turning the corner across the street, heading our way. Sure, I said, but I have a little work left to finish. Why don't you go first? I'll join you as soon as I'm done. Okay. Hazel checked her watch and nodded reluctantly. Fine, hurry up. Though it's the usual place. I nodded as she climbed into a taxi and drove away. I rushed back to the apartment building. When I finally reached the third floor and was about to unlock the door, I paused. Turning to the fuse box nearby, I opened it and used a nail clipper to cut the power to our apartment. Then I hurried up to the fourth floor and waited, peering down the stairs. Sure enough, it wasn't long before Daniel appeared, carrying several bags of fresh groceries. He stopped on the third floor, took out the key Hazel had given him, and let himself in. I waited for half an hour after he entered, then sent Hazel a message. Hazel, My boss just called me into work overtime. I might not be able to meet you, but don't worry if Daniel asks, I'll say you're shopping with me. She replied quickly, whatever, just make sure you cover for me with Daniel. I sent a final okay and slowly descended the stairs to the third floor. As if nothing was amiss, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. As expected, the apartment was pitch black with no electricity. And Daniel wasn't in my living room. I didn't need to guess he was in Hazel's room. I felt my way back to my own room, grabbed my pajamas, and headed straight for Hazel's room, pretending not to know he was there. I pushed the door open and fumbled my way to the bathroom along the wall. I turned on the shower, closing my eyes as the steam wrapped around me. I counted silently to 10 and sure enough, Daniel stepped in. His warm body pressed against my back, his arms wrapping around my waist as he rested his chin on my shoulder. Hazel. He murmured, his voice hoarse and sexually charged. A faint smile tugged at my lips. I lifted my arms and wrapped them around his head from behind. Leaning my head slightly to the side, our lips met. He kissed me hungrily, like a man starved. His lips clinging to mine as he sucked gently, and I kissed him back. A temperature in the bathroom soared as our bodies tangled, breath mingling. I first met Hazel in my third year of high school, though we were the same age. She dressed in an overly mature, seductive style. Nothing like the typical students who went to the school next door, and rumors followed her everywhere. She skipped classes, wore heavy makeup, smoked, and bullied other girls. She was infamously known as a troublemaker there. Yet this so-called troublemaker stole my father's heart completely. He lavished money on her, neglecting our family entirely. He even let her send provocative messages to my mother, a proud lifelong teacher who'd never tolerated such humiliation. Their fights escalated from shouting to physical violence, and my father stopped coming home altogether, broken and desperate. My mother searched tirelessly for them until she finally found them in a tiny rental apartment. What followed was a brutal altercation. My father shielded Hazel as they ganged up on my mother. In the chaos, Hazel pushed her off the building. Despite being rushed to the hospital, my mother didn't survive. To protect Hazel, my father falsely confessed to accidentally pushing her. My mother was dead, and my father was sentenced to 30 years in prison for manslaughter. The cruelest part? I spotted Hazel on the street months later, laughing carefreely with her friends, as if she'd never destroyed a family or taken a life. How could I accept that? She drew in everything I had, yet lived happily without an ounce of remorse. That's when I began plotting my revenge. When I learned her college entrance exam scores were abysmal, condemning her to a third-rate university, I gave up my spot at a prestigious 211 institution and enrolled there too. We became best friends seamlessly. I bided my time by her side for years, waiting for the perfect moment. It finally came when she fell madly in love with Daniel. If she loved destroying families, why not make her feel the agony of betrayal? Now, I'd successfully lured Daniel into bed. Only twice so far, but each time, he'd been utterly intoxicated by me, reluctant to let go. His obsession with my body was the perfect starting point. Next, he needed to know the truth. I wasn't his Hazel. After our passionate encounter in the bathroom, we moved to the bedroom. I wrapped my legs around his waist, leading him to the window just as the moon broke through the clouds, casting silver light over us. I swapped positions with him, settling onto his lap as he sat on the windowside sofa with my eyes closed. The moonlight illuminated my face, revealing my features clearly to him. Sure enough, his body went rigid. I feigned ignorance, fluttering open my hazy eyes. Our gazes met, and I saw pure shock etched across his face. Playing the part of the terrified culprit, I bit my lip, tears streaming down my cheeks. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to, I sobbed, trying to pull away. But his large hand pressed firmly against my lower back, pinning me to him. It's not your fault. It's mine, he said gruffly. Tears still falling, I whispered. I betrayed Hazel. Stop blaming yourself. I'll fix this, he assured me. I looked up at him through tear-blurred eyes, looping my arms around his neck and burying my face in his shoulder. Daniel, I'm shameless. I fell in love with you. So I couldn't help myself. Torment flickered across his face. But the confusion that had plagued him for weeks finally cleared. He and Hazel had never been compatible in bed. He had a strong libido, while she'd always resisted. cutting things short after 5 minutes, leaving him to satisfy himself alone. It was you that night too? Though he already knew the answer now he understood why Hazel had seemed so different. Sometimes it hadn't been her at all. Daniel wasn't under any illusions about being a perfect man. He was just an ordinary guy, susceptible to desire. He fixed the fuse before leaving as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. A triumphant smile crept onto my lips. The next day, Daniel returned to the apartment. Hazel was still fast asleep, so I excused myself to go to work, leaving them alone. But instead of driving away, I waited in my car downstairs. An hour later, Daniel emerged, his expression unreadable. Moments later, Hazel chased after him, tears streaming down her face. She grabbed his arm frantically. I won't agree. I'll never agree to break up. Daniel gently pried her hand off. Hazel, we've never been right for each other. We both know that. What's wrong with us? She insisted, clinging to him again. Is it the sex? No, whatever you want. As long as you want. Just don't leave me, he frowned. You know it's never just been about that. I don't care. I love you. I told my family we're getting married. I'm sorry, but I can't marry you. Why? She screamed. Hysterical. Are you seeing someone else? Is it a girl from your company? Who is that bitch terp? I'll tear her apart. Hazel's madness was unrecognizable to him. He finally wrenched his arm free and strode toward his car as he chased after him, climbing into the passenger seat as he reluctantly let her from my car. I watched her throw her arms around him, unable to hear their conversation. Soon, Daniel's car pulled away from the neighborhood. I followed closely behind at first. He drove normally, but as they reached a bridge, the car suddenly swerved wildly, as if out of control. There weren't many vehicles on the bridge, but those nearby swerved to avoid them. I kept my distance, terrified. As the car teetered on the edge of disaster, I frantically called Hazel. I'd dreamed of her death 1,000 times, but Daniel didn't deserve this. Not when I manipulated him. If he died because of me, how was I any better than Hazel? The call went through, but no one answered. Then came a deafening crash. Daniel's car slammed into the bridge railing. It came to a halt, but white smoke billowed from the rear. I pulled over immediately, rushing toward the wreck through the shattered windows. I saw both of them unconscious, their airbags deployed. I knew time was running out. Smoke meant fire. Maybe even an explosion. I scanned the bridge, but few cars stopped to help, forcing myself to stay calm. I remembered the window breaker in my car. I raced back to fetch it, then smashed the driver's side window, glancing at Hazel. I made a selfish choice, save Daniel first. A part of me still wanted her to burn. I dragged Daniel out of the car and carried him to safety beside my vehicle. Just as I set him down, sparks erupted from his car. My heart twisted with conflicting emotions: hatred, guilt, humanity. In the end, I couldn't bring myself to be as cruel as Hazel. I ran back, risking the growing flames, to pull her out. The moment I laid her next to Daniel, a thunderous explosion shook the air. Flames engulfed the car, lighting up the sky. Now, I sat beside Hazel's hospital bed, watching her sleep. The doctor said she'd wake once the anesthesia wore off. 2 hours had passed, any minute now. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, her eyes fluttered open when she saw me. She blinked, then burst into tears. I didn't move, just watched her silently. Finally, she whispered, her voice hoarse with pain. Hazel, I thought I was going to die. I thought I'd never see you again. She must have been terrified when Daniel's car slammed into the bridge railing. I looked at her, my expression cold and indifferent. Seeing I didn't respond, she grew anxious, trying to sit up. But as soon as she moved, a sharp, piercing pain shot through her legs. He gasped, glancing down at her covered lower body, though the blanket hid everything from view. My gaze followed hers, lingering on the blanket draped over her legs. Finally, a faint smile curved my lips as I met her eyes. Hazel, congratulations on surviving. But I'm sorry to say, you'll have to spend the rest of your life as a disabled person. Hazel frowned, clearly confused. What are you talking about? I continued to stare at her in silence. It took a moment for the words to sink in. Her eyes widened as she stared at me, her hands fumbling beneath the blanket. A blood-curdled scream tore from her lips. What is happening? Where are my legs? Clara, where are my legs? I watched her hysteria calmly until she wore herself out and fell silent. Then I stood up, leaning down slowly to meet her gaze. Hazel, compared to my mother's life, you've only lost a leg. All things considered, you got off easy. Hazel stared at me blankly after a long pause. Realization dawned. Her eyes widened in horror. Why your E? Yes. I'm Clara Violet's daughter. I said my mother's name clearly. Panic flooded Hazel's face. So you got close to me just to avenge my mother. You killed her, yet you lived on happily. Why did you deserve that? So you took my leg. She looked at me in disbelief. Hazel, you give me too much credit. I don't have the power to take a leg. This is just your karma. Whether it was truly karma or my mother's spirit seeking justice. Shards of glass had pierced Hazel's leg during the crash, severing her femoral artery. She lost so much blood that her muscles had necrotized completely. Amputation was the only option. But Hazel would never accept it as karma. Her gaze shifted from disbelief to fiery anger. I felt no fear, only a surge of satisfaction watching her rage, powerless to hurt me. But I wasn't done yet. Leaning closer, I whispered in her ear, "There's one more thing I should tell you." Hazel's eyes flashed with urgency. Before she could reach for me, I grabbed her wrist and pinned it to the bed. Daniel wants to break up with you. Do you know why? Her face twisted with emotion. Because of me. Because Daniel and I slept together. More than once. Hazel snapped. Clara, I'll kill you. I watched her hysteria, smiling as I slowly stood up. Daniel loves my body. He's so much happier with me than he ever was with you. He broke up with you because he's tired of your skinny, lifeless frame. He likes me. Likes me a lot. My words pushed her over the edge. She screamed uncontrollably, screaming threats to kill me. But with one leg gone and immobile, she couldn't lay a finger on me. I watched her until she collapsed from exhaustion, then turned and walked out of the ward. I didn't expect Daniel to be standing in the doorway. I froze for a split second, then tried to brush past him as if I hadn't seen him. Clara. He called my name. I took a deep breath before speaking. Did you hear everything? He nodded softly. Yes. Is it all true? Every word. I used you. To me, you were just a tool to get revenge on Hazel. Daniel's eyes dimmed. He stared at me, lost for words. Seeing he had nothing more to say, I turned toward the elevator. But after taking a few steps, he chased after me. Clara, did you really never feel anything for me? I paused briefly before answering. I'll admit I loved your body, your skill. But I never liked you, to be honest. Anything that's Hazel's disgusts me. Daniel's hands, clenched at his sides, fell limp this time. He had nothing to say. I left the hospital and returned to the apartment. I packed my things quickly and left. Hazel hadn't died. But losing a leg was worse than death for her. I went back to the small town where I grew up, opened a bed and fractions, and started a new life. Everything that had happened in City A felt like a distant memory. Yet every now and then in my dreams, I'd feel his arms wrapped tightly around me from behind. I knew I was just longing for that warm, passionate embrace, safe feeling I'd never known in my life. But that's all it was. Longing. I never deliberately asked about him, but I heard he'd left City A. He hadn't gotten back together with Hazel. And I had no idea where he'd gone. Days turned into months, and my life settled into a peaceful rhythm, growing better with each passing day. I opened more bed and fractions, scattering them across every corner of Cloud City. As usual, I sat at the bar, sipping coffee and reading a book. The wind blew through the door, making the wind chimes tinkle softly. Welcome to Ni Unchu Guest House. I called out habitually. I'd like to book a room. A deep, magnetic voice, familiar yet distant, rang above me. I froze, then looked up. In the next second, I fell into a pair of smiling eyes, dark and deep as a pool. The wind blew again, swirling through the door, and the wind chimes jingled wildly,